Well, good evening, my friends. Jerry Kaifetz here with the first forensic Bible study of the new year, 2021. We missed Christmas Eve and we missed New Year's Eve. I don't know about you, but I stayed up on New Year's Eve not to ring in the new year, just to make sure the old year was gone. And it is. My atomic clock verified that for me. So, hip, hip, hooray. But we'll talk about that tonight. We'll talk about people who prosper and are blessed in the midst of adverse circumstances and how that happens. Why it happens to some people, not to others. This will be a mystery no longer. So stay tuned here tonight. Tonight we're going to look at Psalm 1, the very first part of Psalms, the book of Psalms. And I mentioned Psalm 1 tonight at the dinner table, and my wife Gwen just began quoting it. She knew it by heart, and on and on and on. So anyway, it's a pretty awesome verse. It is about the characteristics of the blessed man or woman. And you know, I don't care if you're a dyed-in-the-wool Antifa, atheist, God-hater. You want to be blessed. You might call it by something else, but you want to be blessed. I want to be blessed. I most surely want to be blessed. And the thing about it that people very often don't understand is that in the scriptures, with the characteristics of the God of the scriptures, talk about that too, knowing God, it is never the situation of blessing or no blessing. It is almost always blessing or curse. There's no neutral ground here. Dante said in his Inferno that he wrote, the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in time of moral crisis remain neutral. I don't know if that's true. It probably isn't. But boy, it sounds good. And you know what? It makes you sound smart when you quote Dante. Yeah. Look him up. So I wrote a book on a journey through heaven. Dante wrote a book on a journey through hell. You know. I recommend you read my book. It's called The Bench, A Heavenly Conversation. So, all right, with that shameless plug, let's just jump into Psalm 1 here. We're going to read this verse, and then we're going to pray. And if God answers that prayer, we'll do fine tonight. Some folks will be helped. Some folks will be encouraged. Some folks will see a brilliant light, not a little twinkle on the horizon, but a brilliant light towards which we all should go. And if God doesn't answer, then I'm wasting my time and you're wasting yours. So pray with me to that end. All right, this is important. This is important. This is not about me doing well as a preacher, as a Bible student. This is about whether or not God chooses to bless our time together. It's the only thing that counts. It doesn't count along with other stuff. You know, have I studied? Am I prepared? Do I have a background? Do I have a foundation? Do I have the degrees? I think the answer to all those is yes. But you know what they say in Texas, that and $1.75 will get you a cup of coffee about anywhere around here, ma'am. It doesn't matter. What matters is God going to bless us or not? He has in the past. I hope he does tonight. Let's read this verse and then we'll pray and we will petition God for those blessings. Psalm 1, verse 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. In his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, skipping a little bit, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. Yeah. And I know it's not common to read prosperity into this in the sense of a monetary achievement, but that's what it means. The Jewish concept, the Hebrew concept of blessing was, among other things, financial prosperity. We're not going to put the emphasis there. This isn't Napoleon Hill saying, think and grow rich, okay? Or all of these charlatan preachers in their three-piece white suits telling you, well, give me some seed money and it'll grow for you. No, it's not that. That's not what we want. But it's part of being blessed according to the Hebrew Bible. Okay? We'll see that. We'll see that tonight, I think. All right. Let's do what we said we were going to do. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you for putting in our laps tonight a copy of your word, the book that reveals you, the book that gives us access and insight into your heart, your mind, so we would know how to live. Bless us and help us tune in to those principles tonight and help us to apply them wisely and judiciously and faithfully. In Jesus' name, amen. That's a prayer we want answered. Oh, yes, it is. All right, Psalm 1. Psalm 1, folks. Blessed. Wait a minute. I want to back up. Before we jump in here, I want to talk about a forensic Bible study for a minute. A forensic Bible study is like a forensic analysis. It is a factual, verifiable, empirical, sound, evidence-based investigation. And the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians, in fact, talks about something that we never talk about. He laid it out. He talked about the mysteries of God. The mysteries of God. Maybe we don't talk about it because we don't have a clue what they are. But the mysteries of God, the Greek word mysterion, means that which is not commonly revealed or known. Okay? And so apparently we can extrapolate from there that these are not the treasures that roll up with the tide and the driftwood and just are laying on the beach for us to come and claim. These are treasures that are further out at sea and deeper. Deeper than most people care to go. A forensic Bible study is going there. It is. The limit of sport diving in the United States is about 100 feet, they say, I guess. And been diving the vast majority of my life since I was 14 years old. My deepest dive was to 270 feet. Let me tell you something about that dive. We saw stuff there that I've never found a diver anywhere, and I'm into 35 countries. I've never found a diver anywhere that saw what we saw there. It was mind-blowing. Trust me. We're not going to get into it tonight. But, all right, I'll tell you real quick. We saw a stingray hovering over a fish trap that was 14 feet across, and that stingray's wings hung over the fish trap, which was 2 feet high. So he was 14 plus 2 plus 2. That was the wingspan of that stingray. The base of his stinger was about like a volleyball. And I don't know how long it was, but it was close to 10 feet. We saw that at depth. You're not going to see that on a sport dive to 80 feet. Those big boys kind of have their own agenda, and it usually involves staying kind of deep, you know. Same with larger sharks, and we don't want to see those. So I've described a forensic Bible study as diving deep, coming up with treasure, as a thinking person's Bible study. So that's what we're doing here. That's what's happening tonight. Okay? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that and see if we encounter any of these mysteries that God has just put within reach, but a little further back on the shelf, with other stuff that's closer on the shelf so you can't see it. And if you're content with that stuff that's within your reach, you'll never see what's behind it. We look what's behind it, and we analyze it, and we think about it, and we study it. And in particular, we look at it in the original language in which it was spoken and penned. And that's where we get our meaning. That's not available through other means. Does that mean the Bible's incomplete? Does that mean you can't access the will of God in an English language Bible? Absolutely, positively not. People will accuse me of saying that. It's false. Okay? You can accomplish God's will enough to be a godly human being, storing up rewards and crowns in heaven for decade after decade, if all you have is an English language Bible and you don't know what a lexicon is, you don't know what an expository dictionary is, you don't know what an interlinear Bible is, you don't know what a word study is, you don't know what a verb parsing is, you don't know the difference between an anarthrous and an arthrous Greek noun. You don't have to know that to please God. Isn't that good news? But if you do know that, you have access to a level of truth in this book that very, very few people know. Very few people. This is how you craft an intricate and consistent systematic theology. In other words, what? Knowing who God is. Knowing how he thinks. I love that concept. Knowing how God thinks. I think my wife knows how I think. I think I know how she thinks. Why? Because we've had a closeness and an intimacy and a love for 35 years. You develop that with God, and you'll know stuff you may already know, stuff that most Christians have no clue concerning. Okay? All right. So blessed is the man. Blessed is this man that we're going to describe. What does that word mean? It's the Hebrew word esher. Esher. Probably echer. And what it means is to walk straight and prosper. Does it mean material prosperity? Yes. Is that the only kind of prosperity it means? No. To walk straight and prosper. And prosper. I've often said, if you put a 2x4 down on the ground and ask me to walk from one end to the other, I can walk from one end of an 8-foot 2x4 to the other without falling off. If you line them up from Weatherford, Texas to Albuquerque and say, let's see you walk from one end of this line of 2x4s to the other, I'm probably not going to do that well. You know it? That's what we're talking about here. That's what we're talking about. We're talking a man who walks straight beyond what it's easy to do. Walks straight to the point where going that straight for that long requires commitment, determination, the avoidance and the perception and the ability to see and understand and predict what forces can push me off. That's the dedicated Christian who has an understanding of what can push him or her off of that path. There's only one thing, and it's sin. It's sin. I've often said that I never knew a man who hated sin more than an old pastor of mine in heaven now, Pastor Bruce Eisen from Hobart, Indiana. That man hated sin. He hated, and he would get wound up and angry and riled and emotional about how much he hated sin. You know, we would get to talking about things and he would just say, I don't understand, Brother Jerry. I don't understand how people can just go toward that. I don't understand that. You understand that? And he was upset, you know, because it made no sense to him, because he could see the destructive element in that which drew people to sin. They saw the glitter, the shine. Yeah. And they didn't see what he saw. That's why his office always had somebody in it counseling with him. Usually somebody who had challenges beyond their ability to handle because of their inability to see that sin encroaching in their lives. So blessed to walk straight and to prosper. Okay, what about that man? What about that man? The man who walks straight and prospers, God says, let me tell you about that fellow. Let me tell you about him. Blessed is the man. And first of all, what we see is you have to be successful first. This is how God thinks, in not disqualifying yourself. You know, I had some of the best jumps in my life when I was in track and field in high school doing the long jump. We called it the broad jump now. I guess that wasn't politically correct after a while. And man, I've had jumps that I just thought, whoa, baby, that's got to be my longest jump. And I stepped on the line. Disqualified. DSQ. Yeah. Seen that in ski racing a bunch of times after my name. DSQ. So after a while, you learn. So first God says, don't disqualify yourself. Stay in the fight. Stay relevant. Stay able. Live to fight another day. Don't go down in the first round. Okay? And this is what he said. And he deals with this from a negative perspective. Blessed is the man who walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. I'm going to park here for a little bit because there's a lot to unpack. Who is the ungodly? Well, the answer to that is very, very specific. It's not general. I know it makes a great topic for a Sunday school class, and the next thing you know, the hour's up and everybody's had their say, and nobody knows the truth. Ungodly, the Hebrew word rasha. Rasha. Okay? And this is what it means. It means the guilty criminal. The guilty criminal. The person who's not just naughty, not just, the adolescent who gets in trouble, who, steals the contents of his sister's piggy bank. No. This is the person for whom sin and crime has been a life endeavor, and who has been caught and who has been pronounced guilty, and that's his identity. It's not a mistake that he made, it's who he is. Okay? It's who he is. Now, when I was at the jail as a chaplain for all those years, I had people that came to my chapel services, and I knew by looking at them, I knew by their body language, this person is in search of a blessing. This is not a hardened criminal. Or if it is, it's a hardened criminal who is open to change. And I could just tell. And every once in a while, there'd be somebody who was more on the hardened criminal side, and I couldn't tell. Closed off body language. I remember this one guy, shaved head, tattoos on his neck, bodybuilder. He didn't give away anything. He didn't. And at the end of the chapel service, he came up to me, held out his hand, and I shook his hand. It's like putting my hand in a vice. And he said, "Sir," he says, "this is going to change my life." That's all he said. And I said, "God bless you, my friend. God bless you." And I walked outside in the hallway, and for the first time in months, maybe years, the sheriff was walking down the hallway. Christian man. And I was still impacted by what this young man had said to me. And I told the sheriff about that. And he looked at me, and he looked down over his glasses, and he says, "Jerry," he says, "that's a big deal right there. That's a really big deal." The sheriff told me that. Yeah, would that more counties had sheriffs like that. So here we are. Don't take advice from those people. That's the first thing you got to do, for crying out loud. I've had friends in school and in high school, and every once in a while I just see him do something like reaching into somebody's purse, or grabbing something in a store, and I'm just going, "Oh man, don't do that." I mean, I was decades away from being a Christian, but I just knew, man, I don't want anything to do with that, That's somebody's money. You know, that's somebody's hard work there. So, number one, that man, the blessed man, does not walk. Walk means manner of life. Okay? Doesn't mean don't ever sin. It means don't make sin your manner of life, your walk. Your walk. Okay? Rasha, the ungodly, the guilty criminal. So we got to stay away from that guy. Nor standeth in the way of sinners. Basically a repeat of what we see in the Hebrew word rasha, ungodly. Sinners is the Hebrew word chata, which means condemned. Condemned. He's screwed up. He's had a fair trial, and he's been found guilty, and he's condemned. Okay? And the blessed man does not stand in that way, in that path. He doesn't go down that road. Okay? You're not going to find him on the corner of Broadway and Fifth Avenue at 1:30 in the morning, because nothing good's going to happen downtown at 1:30 in the morning. Okay? You're not going to find him in a drug neighborhood. You're not going to find him walking by a known drug house and waving to the people, hey, man. That's the way of sinners. The way of sinners. He doesn't have any friends like that. He doesn't know those people. And they don't know him. And it's good if he keeps it that way. He stays out of that way, out of that lifestyle. He's not associated with it. I've had experience with a lot of Christian people for whom that fight against sin is a tug of war. And they pull on the rope and dig in their feet, and they slide forward a foot, and they pull the rope back 2 feet, but then they slide forward 3 feet. It's a constant struggle. Why? They got to let go of the rope and walk away. Walk away. You don't win anything by winning that tug of war. And it's fairly likely that eventually, by you hanging on to that rope and playing that game, you're going face first into the mud. That's what the psalmist is saying here. Okay? Nor walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, hata, the condemned. The condemned. These aren't people who made a youthful mistake and they're going to bounce back and they come from a good family. No. These are people who've made a conscious decision that crime is going to be their way of life. I tell them this in the jail. Told them this a lot. I'd say, I'm going to write a word on the board right now that is the reason everybody who is in this jail, all 450 inmates, what I'm going to write on the board is one word, and it's the reason why everybody is here. Are you watching? I'd turn around and I'd write one word on the board. And this is that word. Shortcuts. Shortcuts. When you're hiking in the mountains and the hiking trail has switchbacks, it has switchbacks for a reason. Is that the straightest way up the mountain? No. No. But the straightest way up the mountain causes rock slides and dislodges rocks on other people. Rocks under which are snakes in the summertime. Yeah. So you know what? It's best not to take that shortcut. Why? The risk is greater than the reward. We talk about that a lot in the jail. Risk-reward analysis. Okay, so the light turned orange, you're flooring it. Congratulations. You're going to get where you're going 30 seconds earlier. But when you get pulled over, you got problems. Especially if you don't have a license or insurance or the money to get your car out of impound or warrants. Yeah. You know what? When that light turns orange, the smart thing to do, step on the brakes. I mean, if you got a buddy in the back seat who got shot and he's bleeding out and he needs to get to the ER, okay, I get that. But those situations are few and far between. They really are. So this is the sinner. Very similar to the ungodly. The ungodly rasha is a guilty criminal. The sinner is hata, a condemned man. Okay? Two people we got to stay away from, and they seem to be kind of the same person. Okay? Nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. The scornful. Scornful. It doesn't sound like a positive word, does it? No, it doesn't. It's the Hebrew word latz or lutz. And I'm going to I can't really define that word for you in a simple sentence, but I'm going to give you insights into the definition of this word scornful. Okay, you want to stay out of his seat. Now, what's a seat? It's a seat of judgment. This is the person who judges the world in a particular way. And whatever that way is, God says, don't do that. Don't be like him. Don't be like him. That person is the kind of person who finds something wrong with everybody, everything, every place. You know what he is? He's a real-life Walter. Jeff Dunham's grumpy old man puppet. Yeah. The scornful, Walter's scornful. The scornful, Lutz, is a person who does this. I'm going to give you 3 synonyms for scornful in an effort to paint the definition, so to speak. Okay? Number 1, to make mouths at. To make mouths at. Now, I learned in my time in theater in Europe that you wore a lot of makeup for the purpose of, I had trouble getting used to that, but you wear this makeup for the purpose of being able to convey expression to people who were 100 feet away from you and who you could never see anyway, because the footlights were always in your face. You didn't know if there was 3 people out there or 3,000. You didn't know. Scornful, to make mouths at. Okay, think about that. Second definition, to bring derision, mocking. So, and then third is boastful. Boastful. So what do we see in a scornful person? We see a person who just likes to make fun of people. Oh, look at you. You know, that's the scornful person who is in judgment, in the seat of judgment over other people. 0 compassion, 0 sympathy, 0 empathy. Jude said, some have compassion, making a difference. The Good Samaritan who went down into the ditch to help the man who'd been mugged, basically, had compassion, and he made a difference. And what I love about that story is that the first one who comes by is the priest. That's organized religion. Yeah. And he's too busy. He's got to get to church because he's got to preach a sermon. Or he's got to count the offering. Yeah. The story says a lot. And it was the Good Samaritan who basically took him, bandaged him, and nobody carries bandages, so he had to take his own clothing to bandage him, and he took him to the inn, and he handed the guy his credit card, as it were, and said, now that's got a pretty high limit on it, but if you reach that limit, call me, and we'll make other arrangements. Yeah, that's the opposite of a scornful. That's the compassionate guy. The scornful guy looks at him and says, wonder what he did to deserve that. He must have really made somebody mad. Well, he got what was coming to him, didn't he? Yeah, that's a scornful person. And God says, that's not the dude I bless. I can't bless that person. I can't bless him. You see, you're disqualified. You forfeit God's blessing by being that person, by not walking straight, by taking the shortcut, by associating with guilty criminals, with condemned criminals, and with the boastful mockers who mock people who are hurting. God says, that really ticks me off bad. Well, let me tell you something. You don't want to make God mad. You really don't. How do you not make God mad? Learn the things that make him mad. Learn the things that make him happy. Jesus said of a Roman centurion, not a Jew, not a priest, not a Sadducee, not a Pharisee, not a temple official, a Roman centurion, the equivalent of a platoon leader, 100 men under him. He says, you see that guy? I haven't found that kind of faith in all of Israel. Yeah. As I like to say, put that in your smoke and pipe it. You see, and that was the kind of thing that just tied the Jews in knots. Whoa, whoa! A Roman soldier! He just said that Roman soldier has the greatest faith of anybody in Israel. We got to get that guy. Not the soldier, Jesus. Yeah. Because they didn't know what we're talking about here. They didn't know how God thinks. Jesus did the same thing again with a Samaritan woman. And when the disciples came back and saw him talking to this half-breed, this Samaritan woman, the Bible says the word in the Greek language there that is used to describe the reaction of the disciples is they were rendered immovable by astonishment. They were frozen. They were paralyzed in astonishment. That's how far we are from being like God. That's how far we are from understanding how he thinks. That's why we have passages like this, and that's why we can access the mysterion, the mysteries of God. The mystery of God is why he went to the Samaritan woman. Mystery of God is why he went to that woman at the well. And think of the things for which he could have condemned her. She'd been married 5 times and she's living with a man who's not her husband. Oh my gosh, the Baptists would have a field day with her. You Jezebel, you harlot, get thee behind me. Yeah, that's not what Jesus did. No. What about the woman taken in adultery? Oh my gosh. My gosh, the Baptists would be building the gallows already. The Mennonites, people like that, whose understanding of God is a set of rules. That wasn't Jesus' understanding of God. He understood God pretty well. You know why? Because he was God. Yeah. And God reached out to that woman taken in adultery. And the common misperception is that when they all left, starting at the oldest, the truth of that is that there was a law, a Jewish law in the Talmud that said you cannot sit in judgment of a person if you've committed that same sin. So all these Pharisees, and Sadducees, and priests, and rabbis, and temple elders, they're all guilty of adultery, starting with the oldest. See, a little tidbit that's revealed there if you dig a little bit into Jewish law and Jewish custom. So let's keep going. Nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. Okay, those are the things you can't do. Those are the things you can't do. And there is 1, 2, 3, 4 times more emphasis on the things that you can't do than on the things that you ought to be doing. Why? Because there's more things that can disqualify you than things that can qualify you. That's my conclusion. I mean, 4 is a bigger number than 1 if you had the same math teacher I had in high school. If you did, God help you. But his delight, what does that person do? The blessed man. What delights him? Well, I have a little confession to make here. I love that word, delight. I really, really love that word, delight. You want to know why? I'm going to give you the Hebrew pronunciation of that word. Delights is Kaifetz. Maybe Kaifetz. That's my last name. Kaifetz. That is the phonetic spelling of the Hebrew word Kaifetz. Okay? Now there we're back to that same place. You see, that and $1.75 will get this boy a cup of coffee anywhere in Parker County, Texas. Anywhere. Now, New York City, it's going to be about $12, but $12 and that will get me a cup of coffee in New York City. His delight, his Kaifetz, is what? His delight is in the law of the Lord. Not a great big list, not here's 10 things that 10 things that will bring that a blessed man has to delight in. There's only one. There's only one. There's all these things you can do that will disqualify you, but there's only one you have to do to be a blessed individual. His delight is in the law of the Lord. Delight. To take pleasure in. To incline toward. Incline toward. To lean in. To lean in. to favor. To favor. If I'm getting on a bus and there's 25 people on that bus and I see one person's got their Bible open, I want to sit next to that person. Yeah. Why? Got something significant in common. I'm attracted to that person. I want to engage that person. I want to talk to that person. I want to hear their testimony. Maybe share mine. Maybe see if there's anything they want me to pray about. His delight is in the law of the Lord. And it's not just a state of mind. Okay, there's action associated with that. I got so much underlining here I can hardly read. In his law doth he meditate day and night. He's infatuated. He's infatuated with God's book. I've read this book cover to cover probably 40 times, maybe more. I study it every single day, early in the morning, in the original languages in which it was written. And now with the tools that we have, the apps that we can get for free for our phone, you can do the same thing. Look up the Takarta Bible. The Takarta Bible, or the Touch Bible. And you see a word, you touch it, boom, your screen opens up to what? An expository dictionary of New Testament words, Old Testament words. You want tools beyond that? That's a lot right there. That'll give you the original meaning in the original language. And you don't have to know Greek. I remember the first thing in my first year of seminary that I had to do, I had to memorize the Greek alphabet. The only other people I knew who would ever memorize the Greek alphabet were fraternity pledges. You know? And that was for a different reason. That was to test the limits of consumption of alcohol of the human anatomy. In his law doth he meditate. Meditate. What does meditate mean? It means to ruminate, to consider, to ponder. In other words, it matters to you. The Bible matters to you. And you find things in it. I don't know how many times I've found things early in the morning, and my wife's still a little ways from waking up, and I just want to say, oh man, I got to go wake up Gwen and tell her about this. And then I think, not a good idea. But you want to tell somebody, you know, you want to tell somebody. Why? Because you're excited about it. And when you're excited about it, you want to share. Now, this attitude had commonality in the first century church. The first century church was missing something that we have in all our churches, front and center, center stage, upstage, elevated, prominent, well paid most of the time. What am I talking about? A pastor. The first century church did not have a pastor. You won't find a pastor of the first century church named in the book of Acts. Why? This is why, what we're talking about here. The people in the first century church had this delight. Kaifetz. They had me. Not really. They had this delight. And so, let me put it to you this way. if you have a Sunday school class and you want that Sunday school class to be as much as possible like the first century church, here's what you're going to do. The teacher is going to say, okay, I'm not going to teach next week. Do you know who's going to teach? I don't either. But we'll be here. And I think there'll be some good teaching going on. And here's what's going to happen. I want everybody to pick one chapter in the Bible and to commit to that one chapter before you leave this room today and say, I will study that chapter for 3 hours this week. That's all. You don't have to commit to teach anybody anything. And then when we come back and we gather a week from now in this Sunday school room, I guarantee you, somebody's going to be busting at the seams to say, let me tell you what I found here. Let me tell you what this says. Holy cow, blew me away. Well, what? I'm next, okay? Don't take too long, George. You like to talk, don't you? Well, I got something to say too. Yeah. That's the spirit we're talking about. That was the spirit of the first century church. No professional clerical class, no paid clergy in the first century church. The Apostle Paul set that model. He said, I would not be chargeable to any of you. That's a direct quote, word for word. Okay? Now, if I ever found myself candidating for a church, first of all, the first thing I'd say is, you probably don't want me, and I don't know if I want you either. But what I want is God's will. And if what you want is God's will, then we have something in common. Okay? But I'm going to tell you one thing. I won't take a salary. Does that mean I don't need the money? Does it mean I'm independently wealthy? No. Here's what we'll do. Once a month, on a Sunday night, when there's no visitors, we'll take an offering for the pastor. And you put in whatever you want. If you don't want to put in anything, you don't put in anything. That's the way we're going to do it. I couldn't feel decent about myself to preach a sermon and hold my hand out. Say, okay, money, I need money now. Yeah, well, yeah, they don't say that in those words, but that's the dynamic. That's the dynamic. And Paul said, no. There'll be no talk of money when I come. He said that. Folks, yeah, we like to talk about the Apostle Paul. Wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, brought the gospel to Europe, and without that, it wouldn't have come to America. Yeah. But that part about no money, well, we just gotta set that one off to the side. I'm just not sure. It might mean something different in the Greek, you know. Yeah. Well, I do know. And I know what it means in the Greek. And it means, I don't want to grab you by the ankles and turn you upside down and shake and see what comes out. You reach in there if you got something you want to come out. And if you don't, that's fine. I'm not in it for the money. I'm going to be making tents all day tomorrow. That's all the money I need. If the pastor can't be blessed of God enough to finance his life and his family and keep a roof over their head, why would anybody want a man like that for a pastor who's living off the backs of other people? You know? I don't know. Now, there's some good men. I know there are. And I know some. And I count some of the greatest Christian, and I count the greatest single Christian, a man who was pretty traditional when it comes to pastoral salaries. It has a retirement to this day, and that's okay. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about what would work for me and why, and what wouldn't work for me and why. Take it or leave it. So there we go. Let's read that verse again. Blessed is the man that walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. There are three things you can't do, and they're all pretty much the same. They're all pretty much describing the same person, you know? But that person who God blesses is like David. The longest chapter in the Bible, the 119th Psalm, is about David's delight in the law. In the law, he says, I run after the law like a deer running through the meadow on a hot day, running toward that brook to get a cool drink, and panting and thirsting and desiring and running for that water. That's me in your book, God. That's me in your book. Guess what? That guy is going to be blessed. That woman is going to be blessed. Yeah. And you can have all of the good things in your life that you can accrue. I'll take God's blessing. God has blessed me in such a way, my gosh, I don't tell people about it. And you want to know the main reason why? It's not believable. No, it's not. I mean, good night. It's not believable. And it's like every month, God just seems to outdo himself. Here, I came across this. I thought you might like it. God, that's awesome. I never even thought of that. That's so cool. And that's how God deals with people who delight in his book. Yes, sir. So there you go. How to be a blessed Christian. Try it. You'll like it. This is Jerry Kaifetz, and I thank you for watching our Forensic Bible Study on this January 7th, 2021. This guy, this blessed guy, the next phrase here in the verse says he's like a tree planted by the rivers of water, and his leaf won't wither. That's because a tree planted by the water gets water regardless of whether or not there's a drought, because he has that secret underground taproot. That's the Christian who is not dependent on circumstances to bring blessing into his life. He has that secret channel that others can't see. But it keeps him from being thirsty. When everybody around him is thirsty. When plants are withering and dying. Yeah. That's how it works. So thank you for watching. And we'll see you next week. Good night.